at the peak wherein South Korea was doing mass testing. They were only doing mass testing at 20,000 tests per day. America is 500,000 tests per day. Still, they were not able to contain it. Japan is almost nil. It's about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a day.
Yeah, a month ago it wasn't 500,000, but it was. It is today, but it was over 250,000 tests per day, and then it was up to 375,000. Now it's up to like 500,000 tests per day they can do. So there's massive testing. There's a lot of problems in the beginning on testing kits. A lot of them were made in China, and the PPEs, personal protection equipment, PPEs, and testing kits, there was enough for hundreds of thousands of people was coming from China to the U.S. company that had the goods manufactured in China, and the ship turned around, and because China needed it, even though America had paid for the goods. So there was a lag in testing in the United States.
May I just return to the South Korea topic, because Grace was saying, and it's true, that the U.S. is doing more testing than Korea was at the height of its battle with COVID-19. But what I want to point out is it's not just mass testing that will solve the problem. What's important is what you do after mass testing. And that spells the difference between beating COVID-19 and not beating COVID-19. Because South Korea, after they tested the people and they were able to identify who was positive, they got the positive people, they isolated them, and they allowed themselves to be isolated. But in the US, you get tested and then you go home and then you have a COVID party. So of course you're going to infect 100 people in about 3 days or more. Mass testing or targeted mass testing can't target everybody, especially if the population is in the millions. But targeted mass testing, I feel, is the start. And then afterwards, you really have to isolate, and then you really have to quarantine in a strict facility where they can't get out so that the infection dies down. And in the meantime, the rest of the population, uninfected, can still function properly, because you can't have the economy fail. That's the problem of the Philippines now, because there was extreme community quarantine, and since we're a poor country to begin with, you really had a lot of hungry people. So many people are daily wage earners and they couldn't get out, they couldn't work, and it just paralyzed everybody. Now that we've reached a point wherein government aid is no longer that plentiful, or government aid has stopped, you have a situation wherein people have to go out and there's no choice. Their only protection is a mask. And just to let you know, on the second week of easing restrictions, 180 train workers got infected.
Yes.
I have not heard of a COVID party, but I'm sure it happens. There's 3.25 million cases, and I think that a COVID party, I think that's more anecdotal as far as it's not 1%, it's not 10%, it's probably 0.0001%. And is it bad if 100 people got infected? Absolutely.
There is an article going around today. One of those who attended the COVID parties just died, and he released an interview saying he regrets it.
And I think it's just anecdotal at best. They're very, very small. What would be relevant in what you're saying? And like I said, one person dying is too many, and having a COVID party is dumb. And if any country would do it, it'd probably be America. Like, I'm not questioning your word at all. What would be more relevant in America, which is terrible, is we have freedom of religion.
Yes.
And churches had to be closed. They were on lockdown. And what they said is you can have a drive-through service where you go into a parking lot and they do it by a loudspeaker and everybody stays in their car. But of course, especially in the South, in the United States, they kept having services. And in churches, we have mega churches that hold 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people. The police would go there and try to stop the services. But they think that at the very minimal, at least 100,000 people were infected in church. And the numbers could be as high as 250,000. That's really unfortunate, but that more than a COVID party, the whole religious thing is people didn't have information, and I support everybody's freedom of religion, but they wanted to go into the church. I understand that. They didn't want to sit in the parking lot in their car and listen over the internet. That was a huge problem in the United States, that government did not know what to do.
Liberty is definitely good, right? But right now, it's not as effective. With COVID-19, it's really starting to be irrelevant. Because the way I see it, COVID-19 it's a community effort. It's people coming together and doing what has to be done together, sacrificing a little, which is pretty much why East Asia was really able to contain it.
Religious people were also having parties that they're going to be healed by God, and they would bring one person into the congregation who was very, very sick and should have probably been in a hospital, and they did faith healing, and that got spread.
That kind of religious healing, it's been happening in some Islamic countries, and yes, they do get COVID-19 after. What has to be highlighted here is the fact that to arrest COVID-19, it really has to be a community effort, because it's transference. You are actually fighting against infections.
I totally agree with Rikki. There's a lot of, whether it's a COVID party or religious or your fishing club, there's a lot of COVID deniers that think it's a hoax. And she hit on the point, whether it's a COVID party or just a gathering of people who don't believe.
That's something that we have to learn from the South Koreans and the Japanese. The South Korean was able to come out with a very direct communication line. South Korean men, 30 years old and up, are all soldiers. So they have a direct communication line to the government. And that is what was used along with the CCTV camera. If you do that in the Philippines, or if you do that in a Western country, that's tantamount to against privacy. But at the end of the day, the South Koreans allow it, because it has to be a community effort.
Another Florida teen died, and this is after her mother took her to a religious COVID party. Can you imagine?
And I think Rikki was also the one who pointed this out, that in the United States, it's all about liberties and rights. That's what the country is built on, right? There are some people who, for them, it's okay to follow the rules. They think that the rules are there for a reason. And then there are people who think that rules are an affront to their right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Not just the US, but elsewhere. These things happen. There are people who think that way.
Regarding these rules, so I don't know if you can see this diagram right here. If you can just see this small part right here, my terrible drawing, that's Japan. And this whole is the United States. Just Japan, the square mileage of Japan, of all the landmass, is about almost exactly the square mileage landmass of the state of California, which is just one of 50 states in the United States. So I'm not saying the United States is 50 times bigger, but the landmass compared to Japan it's huge. And roughly, Japan has 132 million people. America has 327 million people. For just throwing out big numbers, it's about a third, actually. But you would think that since Japan has a lot of Asian people coming in and out, we have so many tourists here, we're physically or geographically close to China. One would think that, and they're both top world economies, that they don't have a problem with infrastructure. All things said, you would think that Japan would have approximately half of the cases and deaths as the United States. And it's not even close. And it's never been close from the beginning. It's always been a factor of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And as of today, there's 3.3 million cases in the United States. It's, as of about 1 hour ago, it's 3,350,000 cases in the United States, 137,000 deaths. So you were going to say Japan is about half the population, then you would think that half of 3.3 million is 1.5 million, or 1/3 is 1 million. There's only 21,000 cases here in Japan. That's nowhere near a million, and there's 982 deaths here. To throw one more thing into that, Japan, most people travel on insanely crowded trains and subways. Japan, everybody, we're all packed together here, whether everything is smaller. So my question to all of you is, why is there such a big discrepancy between Japan and the United States?
I would surmise it's really the discipline of the Japanese people. Not to mention the fact they're very hygienic too, I think. They have that discipline and they listen to government. I think that really plays a big part.
I just wanted to make one more point to add to my data that, being from America and talking to people every day, doing business there, and then I travel all over Japan, I would say that America has had more compliance with as far as lockdown. We don't have lockdown here in Japan. We had suggested, like, if you don't need to do this, don't do that. Restaurants were still open. Department stores were still open. Of course, we closed Disneyland right away. That's obvious. But other than that, our daily life was not that affected. It was affected. I mean, we wear a mask everywhere. And when people come into my shop, they're required to wear a mask. And I have to have hand sanitizer. And I hand sanitize the door so when they open it. But I think overall, there were more. My friends that own businesses had to shut them down. Similar businesses in the United States. And I'm not saying everybody complied because they're like Angelo said, you had that spirit of freedom in America, and no, I'm not going to shut my store down, and the riots happened. That's a whole different thing. But overall, I think that they had more procedures, more lockdown than they did in Japan. Just from myself, I think there was more compliance, more stricter measures taken in America than there was here in Japan. And that's just from what I'm seeing and from what I'm experiencing and talking to my friends as far as closing businesses down. This is going to get beyond this whole discussion. And I'm not just saying that because I'm proud to be an American. I don't want to see more American people die. And I don't want to see more Filipino people die from this. Humanity, as Rikki said, we need to come together and figure this out. And there is no cure for it as of yet. I'm not a molecular biologist. I'm not a geneticist. I think that they're going to find out 5 years from now that there are different strains of this virus, different people in different climates, because why they cannot figure out why forget about Japan compared to America, which complied better or worse. Inside of the United States, states that supposedly took more action than the state next to it have 2 or 3 times the infection rate. And they don't know why that is either. I think there are different maybe strains that affect not just the geography, but obviously latitude, and it affects temperatures. They said warmer climates are susceptible to age groups, where colder climates are susceptible to a different age group within the same virus. And I think that the more I study it, the more I don't know about it, Angelo. But I think nobody has the answer, and I certainly don't.
And we are just really basically talking according to our observations and experiences. But I would just like to say this. One of the things I've noticed about Japan is that for some reason, they really just have the ability to learn and to use that learning. One of the reasons why COVID-19 was not able to spread in Japan is simply because they've learned so much from influenza. And how to actually protect yourself from influenza is practically how you should protect yourself from COVID-19.
I agree. Wasn't it Japan who made mask wearing fashionable?
No, and Rikki, it was also the Japanese who went against the theory of WHO that masks are not important.
Japan dealt with it well, but so did South Korea, so did New Zealand.
To answer your earlier question, Angela, what did I think about why it was so successful, and we don't have the incidents that we do compared to my United States example. My friends are asking me the same things. Correlation is not causation, but one item that is correlation is the mask. When it started to be known, January into February, and then when it became a topic on social media, people were asking me, what's different in Japan? Is it colder, warmer, this, that, or what's different? And I said, you know what? I think about not half the people, but a quarter to maybe 40% of people were already wearing masks.
Yes, and they're used to it. It's already part of their culture.
Exactly.
But I think when this started in the outbreak, when it was really first starting, I think our allergy season was starting and our flu season was kind of winding down. So people, when they have a cold or sneezing, they put it on. And there was a lot of people already wearing masks. And and then once it became where, hey, there's a new thing out, you might catch it. People just, well, I'll wear a mask anyways. I'm not sick, but I'll just wear it.